Hey y'all, our group consisted of myself, Kai Barr, Emmy Higgins, and Ashley Miller. Our goal of this project was to determine tsunami destruction based on measured magnitudes of earthquakes. Some of our most important features included tsunami wave height and earthquake magnitude. We wanted to focus our efforts around the Ring of Fire as there has been continuous seismic activity since the start of written tsunami and earthquake records. We were very interested in this topic as it has real-world implications that we believe could help future tsunami victims. We started by acquiring 2 data sets provided by Kaggle. There was historical data recorded starting in 1800 for tsunamis and 1965 for significant earthquakes. We were able to combine the data sets and use key features to determine the relationship between earthquakes and the resulting tsunami. Here is a visual of the recorded earthquakes from our data set. This was a super neat visualization that backed up the concept that earthquakes tend to happen around tectonic plate boundaries. When cleaning our data, we determined that it would be better to replace non-values with zeros so that we didn't reduce the size of our data set. However, there are drawbacks to this method, such as reduction of usable data. Another key thing to mention is that we had 2 features from both data sets with the same name that had to be changed before we could start pre-processing our data. We wanted to get a sense of the magnitude distribution for our earthquake data set so we could determine the amount of moderately sized earthquakes as well as massive earthquakes. Our histogram backed up our original hypotheses that there would be more moderately sized earthquakes compared to earthquakes with a magnitude of 7 or higher. We then plotted the same data with more precise magnitudes. An interesting note was the uptick in earthquakes with magnitudes of 6.3, 6.5, and 7 compared to the amount with similar magnitudes. We also wanted to see if there was a correlation between max water height and total damages in millions of US dollars. As you can see, there are only few data points outside of the 20-meter water height and 10 billion. While this makes sense, you can see there's a slight positive correlation between the two, which we expected. To begin model selection, we first had to standardize the data that we would be using in our models. We went with both logistic regression as well as support vector machines, as we would be able to train a model with limited inputs and determine outliers within the data set, which is common in the field of earth science as nature tends to be quite volatile. Despite our relatively sound reasoning for choosing the models that we did, we unfortunately did not get great results. For the logistic regression, we were able to get an accuracy score of about 42% despite reworking our data frames. We switched our focus to decision trees and random forests because we felt like it could give us both a regression and classifications, as well as provide visualizations that could help us interpret the data. Initially, we set the max depth to none, but that yielded an accuracy score of about 21%. To determine if there was a better depth, we ran a loop function from 0 to 20 that would test every depth within the iteration. Ultimately, we yielded a max score of about 35% with a max water depth of 1. We were disappointed in these results, so we determined it was best to further reduce our data frame. This required additional cleaning but minimized the risk of overfitting due to noisy data. We then set water height as our target and kept earthquake magnitude and total damage depth as our features. As you can see, we were able to analyze which features results in the biggest waves. For example, it can be seen in the plot depicting total damages versus the magnitude of the earthquake that tsunamis with the highest waves occurred when the magnitude of the earthquake was between 7 and 8. And the corresponding costs and damages was approximately 200 million. These results also yielded some interesting observations, such as the fact that depth doesn't have any pattern or trends in relation to max wave height. This is an important result because it tells us that if we were to continue to improve the results of this project, we wouldn't include the depth feature in future models and analysis. We validated the models using confusion matrices, accuracy scores, and F1 scores. Unfortunately, our accuracy score was about 48% for our decision tree model, which was the best that we got. Here you can see the best score of our model is around 0.5. This isn't the result that we were hoping for, but we think the low score is most likely due to sparse data being trained and tested. Here is a visualization of the loop that I mentioned earlier. You can see that 1 is definitely the most accurate based on depth. While we didn't get the accuracy for our models that we were hoping for, we learned quite a lot about the process of data science from pre-processing to validating our results. In the end, we were able to conclude that the features that were most important for determining wave height were costs and damages in millions and magnitude of the earthquake. We were also able to determine that the depth was only contributing to overfitting and therefore worsening our original models. If we were to do this project again, we would choose a more suitable data set that had fewer missing values. We would narrow our project scope and determine which features were most important in pre-processing. Ultimately, this project allowed us to get a real understanding of how a real data scientist needs to think, plan, and adapt to troublesome data sets. Thank you.